We're hearing a lot about the rising demands at food banks in the GTA. Just today, the Daily Bread announced that their clients have quadrupled since pre-pandemic times. But it's not just their problem. Food banks in Scarborough are struggling just as much to meet that demand, even more than during the pandemic. Here's more from a new Scarborough food bank client who now makes a visit every week.
Regarding the food price at the grocery store, it's way too expensive now, and with a small disability pension, I have no choice, so I have to turn to the food bank.
Suman Roy is the CEO of Feed Scarborough Food Banks and joins me on the line now. Good afternoon, Suman.
Good afternoon, Farah.
Tell me about the demand at your food banks right now. What are you seeing?
Year over year, our numbers have grown 230%.
Wow.
It's something that is remarkable. It is unprecedented. It is really putting us to think that what's next and how we can keep up with it.
I know the last time I spoke to you was during COVID, and back then the food banks were struggling. But are you seeing things worse than before?
Yeah, looking at what's happening now, the food demand in COVID times was a breeze. Even 2022 to 2023, that is where our 230% growth is.
Wow.
Unfortunately.
Now, I understand that your food banks just ran a study on the client visits you had last week versus this time last year. What did you find?
So we do this every week. We see the last 3 years numbers. And just to give you a perspective, in 2021 last week, we served 987 clients. In 2022, it was 2,237. And 2023, last week, we served 4,344.
Just an incredible
that is the kind
demand.
Of jump.
Yeah, it's an incredible demand. And I understand you also looked a bit more closely at sort of, somebody who might make minimum wage and what it's like for them to try and make ends meet right now. What did you find?
Yeah, so we did a study in the Birchcliff area of Scarborough, and we realized that somebody who's making minimum wage living in a one-bedroom basement apartment has only $1.81 left with them after paying rent and utilities. And that is for transit, for food, for clothing, for everything else.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that kind of answers this question that I'm about to ask you. But, from the people that you're talking to, the people you're having conversations with who are coming to the food bank, what are you hearing from them and why the demand is so high right now?
So 38% of our current clients have at least one full-time job. That says a lot. We have tremendous amount of students now, post-secondary students coming to our food bank. But I think the key that everybody's talking about is certainly Toronto is becoming an unlivable city. With the tremendous high rents, higher cost of transit, and very precarious employment, it is really hard for our clients, for the people of the community to make their ends meet. And food is the first place where they decide to cut as much as they can to be able to pay for transit so they can get to work.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
So it is absolutely heartbreaking what's happening.
We've been hearing from the government that minimum wage is set to go up in October, up to $16.66. From your study, you highlighted just how little is left over at the end of a paycheck. How much do you think that might help the situation that we're talking about?
I think it is great that minimum wage is going up, but it's still a tokenism. It's still way below the livable wage in Toronto. And I think that is where the issue is. Maybe now they can actually afford transit to get to work without going into debt or borrowing money. But it's still not a livable wage. Still, we will not see the demands met unless and until there is more meaningful action. We have seen from the federal government, for example, giving $467 for a family of four, a one-time to top up for the food inflation. If you do the math, it is $9 a week for a family of four. All they can do is probably afford one cauliflower that week. So it is certainly not enough. A lot is, we hope that is going to happen. And that is, I think, the biggest question is we need help now. We are all strained to the max. And today we heard Daily Bread talk about the same thing. This is a pandemic of its own.
It sounds like you guys are so busy, Suman, like, trying to address this demand, respond to this demand. How are you doing that within the food banks in your network?
I think the biggest challenge that we have also are donations that we were getting has come down drastically over the last 3 years. From the average per person donation that we had in 2021 to what we had in the first quarter of 2023, it's literally half. So that's affecting us tremendously. We are thankful to over 220 volunteers that we have that comes out regularly to every week to help our community. It's not something to be proud of that we opened our 6th food bank in our community this past Friday. We certainly take a lot of shame in announcing that, but we didn't have a choice. We need to serve the community. The community needs help. It is a public health emergency that we are facing this today.
Well, Suman, I know that so many people in your community appreciate the work you're doing. It doesn't sound easy. It sounds like it's only going to get more difficult, but we really appreciate the work that you do and also for taking the time to speak to us today.
It's a pleasure, Farah. Thank you.
Suman Roy is the CEO of Feed Scarborough Food Banks.